Okay, so we're going to be speaking about mixing tonight. We've been speaking about mixing a little bit already when we spoke about the equalizer. What we're going to be doing this lesson and the next one is to essentially look at mixing from a conceptual point of view and have a lot of exercises. So that hopefully by the time we finish, you'll be able to mix a band, or at least start to mix a band. And hopefully we will bring some kind of concept that will help you to mix. Okay, firstly, I would like to look at I think there's 5 different basic principles of mixing. And after that, as we look at them, we're going to do exercises. Some of them will not have an exercise, but most of them will have. So let's start somewhere. Firstly, what is the mixing is, I would say conceptually, is our ability to bring balance. I often think of myself as the balance police. So what I do for a living, I bring balance, which is quite a beautiful thought. Because all I do is really bring in balance between different aspects of the same song. The important thing I would like to start with on my fundamental statement is that mixing is the harvest of the whole sound production. Do you remember we spoke about those 5 building blocks of the sound production? Now, mixing is like the harvest of that labor. If you have done well your job, if you have planned your gig or your production correctly, if you have created the right input sound field, used the right microphones, processed correctly, good monitoring or good PA for the audience, had a good room to play in for the audience. So if all those factors contribute to the mixing. One of the problems when we mix is that people think mixing is just about maneuvering the mixer. So we sit there and we start to maneuver. I'm going to tell you this story because it's really funny. But years ago, I was in a venue, and I was, for some reasons which I'm not going to go into the detail of, I was asked not to do the mix of this specific band. It was the opening of a church, I can say that. And for some stuff that happened on the Thursday, which is quite a funny story, which I'm not going to tell, which is not sound related, they asked me not to mix, which was okay. So they suffered, obviously. But one of the funniest part of the whole experience was that the engineer of the church mixed for the opening for the band that I was working with. And I will never forget this picture. There was a relatively big mixer, but very silly, because one of those big mixers, a lot of channels, but a lot of smoke, but no substance. And this guy was just touching every knob we could think of. It's literally, it was this dance. And I thought, you don't know what you're doing. And I can see it, that you don't know what you're doing, but looking at how you're moving. And so can you see this picture of this? And also channels that are not even on, but he's touching. Everybody looks very impressed because he looks busy and he looks like he knows what he's doing, which obviously he didn't. But that's not mixing. Okay, that's I don't know what you want to call it. That's a farce. Mixing is harvesting great choices that lead you to have a great sound. So mixing starts when you choose the right mic for the right application, for the right instrument, for the right speaker, the right singer. Today I actually spent, between yesterday and today, more than an hour looking into 2 microphones for a speaker. So we looked at this mic or that. I recorded some of his speech with this mic or the other one. We went to the venue, which is also a church where he speaks, and we listened with both microphones. Now that looks like possibly overdone, because wow, what is the big fuss about spending more than an hour or even more just to compare 2 little mics? What is the difference really? They both sounds good. But I guess the whole idea is, I know that eventually when this person speaks, the good sound that the audience will get is not going to just be because the engineer is doing a great job, but because there was great care that went into choosing the right mic. Okay, are you with me? So I want you to understand that mixing it's just the harvest of many choices. And if you choose correctly, eventually you will have a great sound. Okay? So firstly, remember this. Mixing is the harvest of many choices. And some of the choices you have made have very little to do with mixing. Secondly, mixing is like building a house. That's I think is a great analogy. When you build a house, you don't start from the ceiling. Okay, let me give you this analogy. What is the first thing that you build when you build a house? The foundation. Okay, remember the sound production concept that I shared with you is like laying a good foundation. If you lay a good foundation, this house will stand. Okay, so let me illustrate this. So you got a foundation, which is the production, what you have chosen. Then you have the walls. Okay, then you have the roof, and then you have the decorating inside. Once everything is done, you decorate the venue or the room, the house. Okay, now most of us love to start from the decoration because it's what attracts the most attention. You know, if I had a Picasso in my house, it stands pretty much, it fills the whole room. Or if I had a Rembrandt, there's some Rembrandt work that I would love to have. The Return of the Prodigal Son is one of them. But anyway, you would possibly have one room with this amazing painting. It will fill the room. But said that painting needs a wall to stand on. Okay, so that's often what we do. We kind of focus on the last bit of detail without understanding that I can have a Rembrandt or a Picasso, but it won't hang without a wall behind it. So mixing is like the same thing. You have to build a foundation. And I'm going to give you an analogy very shortly when we speak about the different music component. I'll come back to this building analogy. But if you can grasp that, it means that you don't just mix, you actually build a mix. So I want you to grasp this concept. You build a mix. A mix doesn't just happen, you build one. If you just realize that you're already on the right track, because you will switch from mixing just happens to intentionally building a mix. It's very different. One of the things that you do intentionally, for instance, and I might speak a bit more later, is how do you arrange the channels on the mixer? That for me is very important. Ergonomics is which channel goes where and which unit goes where. If I need to mix, everything in this environment needs to be comfortable for me. I should be able to, without even looking, know which unit is where and which channels is where. I don't even have to read, this is the bass drum. I know that there is the bass drum. You know what I'm trying to say? Obviously, it's more complex when you have a lot of channels. But the bottom line is, the mix doesn't just happen, you build a mix. Like a builder, you build a mix. And often, the foundation, which is the aspect of the house that we see the least, if we walk into a house with a Rembrandt, what would you remember about that house? Possibly the Rembrandt. Hopefully you know what the Rembrandt is, but Rembrandt was a very famous painter. You won't remember, wow, that house had phenomenal foundations. You won't walk away and say, wow, those foundations were phenomenal. Well, I never seen such foundation in my life. So even though those are invisible, they're essential. In fact, possibly the less visible something is, the more essential it is. In fact, there's a quote about our body that the less visible part is, more essential it is. Think of your organs, inner organs. They're not visible, but you can't go without them. Okay. The next thing that I want to highlight is that mixing, like everything about sound, has an absolute fundamental principle, and you can guess which one it is. Which one it is? It's listening. So listening is the cardinal principle of mixing. Why is this important? And I'm going to repeat it, even though I've said it many times. Is that when you mix, it's so easy to stop listening. This is true when you do an album, when you do a live gig. So you kind of were building the mix, okay, but now it's like half an hour into the show or 10 minutes into the show, depending how long your concentration is, and you're already wandering off. You're thinking of dinner, you're thinking of lunch, you're thinking, well, I haven't had either. I've been awake 55,000 hours. I would love to sleep. Okay, obviously it's human. But the point is, suddenly your concentration shifts, your attention is something else, you're not listening anymore. And the minute you stop listening, that's when trouble starts, because you lose touch with what you're doing, and you can't afford that. So it's critical that you listen and keep on listening. Also, some of us, once you've done this a few times, you can get into autopilot. Autopilot is, okay, I process the bass drum in this way. I process the vocal in this way. And I process, so you go on autopilot. That's what you do. This is, obviously, we're not talking about so much about processing. We only really spoken about the equalizer. But eventually, that's what often happens. You kind of get into this autopilot mode, and then you get stuck there. So it's very important not to fall into the autopilot mode, is to listen and keep listening, so that your attention never drifts. So that if you can just kind of grasp this bottom line principle, you will really not lose focus of what you're doing. I catch myself sometimes, if I'm doing an album, after a while, obviously your attention goes, and then I literally imagine myself looking at myself sitting, and go, what are you doing? You're not listening. And then kind of wake up, kind of, yes, I'm not listening. And then I realize that this thing is not working because I'm not listening. Sometimes if you do an album, sometimes it's actually very good practice is to take regular breaks, because your ears, after a while, you don't hear so well, and your attention is rejuvenated. So taking breaks while you mix an album is very important. The last two things I want to mention from a conceptual point of view, and then we got to more musical stuff, is that ultimately when you mix, music is the centerpiece of what you're trying to do. It's all about the song. And this is interesting, and again, maybe you might think, oh, why am I saying that? Because, again, when you do something, you so easily can detach yourself from what you're doing. And what you're doing when you mix, you're trying to create a balance that will make this song sound absolutely phenomenal, sound absolutely unique, sound like nothing else anybody has ever heard before. That should be your aim. Remember, I said at some point, mixing is creating an illusion. Because think about it, those things don't exist for real. Sounds is all here. It's an illusion. It's an impression. It's a perception that only really occurs in our brain. So you are the magician, for the lack of a better word, and you create an illusion. But the pilot, what should lead you is that you never lose sight of this song. How can you add to this song? Because ultimately it's about the song. The musicians are on stage or in the recording room for the song. The greatest song in history are songs that will be remembered because they are great songs. And somehow the production did not detract it from the song, but it aided to the song. Sometimes I think we can get in the way of the music. It's very easy to do that. So one thing that you should always never forget is, how can I aid to the song, number one, and number two, how can I not get in the way of the song? Whatever you do needs to facilitate the song rather than get in the way of the music. Okay, and now you say, well, that's very philosophical. It isn't very philosophical. You might be making a choice by EQ and other type of processing that doesn't help the song. It might sound great, like a specific instrument. You're processing one single sound really well, but it doesn't fit in the song. So suddenly, for the sake of having that great moment of genius that will work well on another song, you're losing touch with the song. Okay, so it's all about the song. It's all about stepping back and hearing what the song is. Another thing that, while I'm at it, that could be important to mention is that often what people do, like the illustration of earlier of this engineer that just went like that, one thing that he was definitely not doing, he was not listening. So sometimes, because we go into autopilot, when we do a sound check or when we mix in a studio or both, we don't even listen to what the band is doing. You go, bass drum, bass, vocal, guitar, you just know what to do because you've done it before, and you're not listening to what they're doing. You lose touch with the song. And if you lose touch with the song, you're not going to facilitate the song. It's just the way it is. So a big word of caution is don't lose touch with the song. And the last thing is that processing, I said earlier, we create an illusion. Now, up to now, we looked simply at equalizing, and we're not going to look at the other processing, what we can do. But there's so much stuff we can do. The program that you have can do so many other things, can compress, can gate, can do a whole lot of dynamic controls, can add special effects like reverb, delay, choruses, and flanges, and whatever else you can imagine. There's so many things we can do. And so I would like you to understand that all you do when you process is to bring the magic, is to make that sound or those sounds that grab your imagination and just make them sound amazing. That's what you do with processing. You bring in something magic. It is like creating an illusion that is not there. That's why I love mixing, because sometimes you're able to really take the song to a totally different level. In fact, theoretically, you should always be doing that. If you're not doing that, you're not mixing very well. Obviously, again, don't get in the way of the music, but without your contribution, the song should be poorer for it. With you, the song should sound much better. So I think I mentioned this before in one previous lesson. One of the greatest compliments I've ever received was from a band, and a friend of the band was in the audience. I was doing the sound for this band, and afterwards this musician came to me and said, wow, you were like the fifth musician on stage. What you were doing was adding to the music so well, but also so adequately, that you were like one of them. You understood what they were doing, and you were aiding to what they were doing. Do you see? That's our role. It's when we process music, that's what we do. Okay, you got that.